Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. This is a glorious Tuesday if you're a fan of the Michigan Wolverines football team getting the job done last night in the national championship. I'll spare you all the fight song. I know everybody who listens is not a Michigan fan, but Jim, what I will say briefly is that there were several key factors to winning the national championship. One was a defensive plan that stopped one of the most high-octane offenses in the country, a powerful running game, which was effective when it needed to be to get the job done. But most importantly, my 1998 Rose Bowl shirt from after the 1997 season, which was the last time the Wolverines won the national championship, had been a bad luck charm for every big game until this season. So I didn't wear it for the Ohio State game, for the playoff game against Alabama, for the Big Ten championship game, or yesterday. So I didn't win it, but I made sure they didn't lose it as a result of my T-shirt. So that's critical.
Greg, what's it like to have your team win the championship?
You know, I got a little spoiled in the 90s with the Bulls, and then I went on a pretty long drought until the Cubs won in 2016. It feels good, Jim. Feels real good.
It does. I'm a very casual Yankees fan, and that is kind of the opposite of our usual, NFL team misery. When you're a Yankees fan, you don't even pay attention to the postseason. The regular season is just preseason. That's just warm up and prep. And then in the 90s, you were winning like, okay, yeah, we won the championship again. Okay, that's nice.
Yes, you can get a little bit ungrateful when you get a lot of success. But you are in Iowa, which won the Big Ten West this year and played Michigan in the Big Ten title game. I understand that all your big plans of getting out and interviewing people and hitting the diners and whatnot got a little bit of a sidetrack today.
Yeah, so when my pilot said, folks, we're going to get you in about an hour before the snow, which is good. You'd rather have that than getting stranded or having to divert or something like that. We've all had a General Esperanza style delay with flights and such. But I got there, skies were very cloud heavy. First flurries were coming down as I checked into the hotel, and a foot of snow is in the process of coming down here. Nobody on the streets, not easy to do those man on the street interviews or anything like that. I do have enough stuff. I'll be covering the CNN debate at Drake University tomorrow night. But as of this morning, both the Des Moines Police and State Department of Transportation are telling everybody, stay off the roads, do not go outside unless you absolutely have to, and all that stuff. And I will just point out that apparently, we're supposed to get more snow Thursday, Friday. I'm supposed to fly back on Friday. And the projected temperature range for the day of the caucuses, which is like you say, the night of the caucuses, high of -5, low of -13. Good luck, everybody.
Welcome to January in Iowa. That's you got to really be committed to go out and support your candidate. Now, I heard that Vivek didn't qualify for the debate. I assume that means Christie, and of course Asa didn't. So this is a two-person head-to-head?
This is indeed a two-person debate, which I think will be interesting. I think if you've seen this as DeSantis and Haley battling to be the last candidate, in the non-Trump option, this is it. This is the chance they're going to get to make the case that they ought to be that. I should give credit where it's due. Ramaswamy has a relentless campaign schedule. Haley had to cancel it. Trump and Haley both had to cancel events yesterday. Look, there's a foot of snow coming down, and but Ramaswamy compared himself to Washington crossing the Delaware, and he has many events going on across the state. So he will not be on the debate stage. Trump will be skipping this one as well. But the irony is, like 2 miles away, at the Iowa Civic Center, Iowa Event Center, or something like that, he'll be doing a live town hall with Bret Baier and Fox News. At the same time, counter-programming. I'm sure CNN is just, thrilled with that.
Yes. He knows how to keep himself in the spotlight even when he's not on the stage. That's pretty significant. But we'll be talking about his debate strategy a little bit later in the podcast. But let's get to our good martini. And this is good because it's not happening. This was very close to being one of our crazies yesterday with Scott Bertram. William Penn will get to stay in Welcome Park in Philadelphia. The National Park Service withdrawing a proposal Monday to take down a statue of William Penn at a Philadelphia historical site as part of a renovation that touched off a torrent of criticism, the AP said. This was all designed, Jim, to provide more inclusiveness to the site. I think there's going to be more of a focus on Indians and so forth. But when you go back to the effort to take down Confederate statues, whether it's Charlottesville or wherever over the past several years now, what conservatives said at the time is, well, does it stop there? Are you going to go after Jefferson and Washington? And the answer at the time was no, but then it became yes. And even they were changing the name of Abraham Lincoln High School in San Francisco, hardly on the side of the Confederacy. William Penn, who was nice to the Indians and was opposed to slavery, was going to be next on the chopping block. But I guess if you raise enough of a ruckus, common sense at least temporarily prevails.
Well, I was going to say, when this proposal came forward, people fairly asked, so is the state still called Pennsylvania? Or are you going to call it Equityvania? Harriet Tubman-vania? Like I'm all for putting Harriet Tubman on the 20. There are other good people worth recognition, but does everything need to be renamed? And also my second thought was so we're not going to have him on the National Park Service land, a statue of William Penn. Isn't he the guy at the top of City Hall?
I believe so.
In Philadelphia? That going to have to come down too? The two things I think jump out about this. The first is that by the standards of the federal government, this was fairly quickly reversed. I think it is safe to say somebody in the apparatus of the Biden administration recognized, we went, some ideologue in our department bit way off more than they could chew. The other thing that was noteworthy was Pennsylvania Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro issuing a statement saying that he and his staff had been in touch with the administration, vehemently objecting to this, and that the plan had been scrapped. You periodically hear about Shapiro being a potential Democratic presidential nominee, not this cycle and maybe not even next cycle, but at some point down the road. And people say he's got, for a Democrat, good political instincts. You generally don't see him making dumb mistakes, and he recognized this as a dumb mistake, and very much wanted to get himself out front on the other side. Let's also point out that after McCormick, the Republican Senate candidate in Pennsylvania, was spitting hot fire over this. And look, if you're a Republican running for the Senate in Pennsylvania, this is just a gift-wrapped present to you. After they announced they weren't doing it, Bob Casey issued a statement saying that he was initially opposed and was glad that they hadn't. So welcome to I think he sprained something getting up on the bandwagon, but nonetheless, we're hoping a quick recovery to Senator Casey on that one. So, this is a win. This is good news. I could certainly understand people saying they're going to try to push this forward when either the political environment is better or when people aren't noticing or something like that. This became too high profile and too ridiculous for them to support. But look, the person who proposed this, it's not like they're getting fired or anything. It's federal government, Greg.
Of course not. Of course not. Yeah, Bob Casey doesn't strike me as the guy who races to do anything. He kind of reminds me of Prince Valium in Spaceballs, who's just kind of barely awake half the time and not using much voice inflection. But that was a no-brainer for the governor, for McCormick, as you said, and just people who should understand the history of Pennsylvania. I don't know why they keep wanting to erase everybody, but this one was a no-brainer, and I'm glad they reversed it. All right, let's talk about our first great sponsor for the day, and that is 4 Patriots, makers of so many great products, and you can find them all at their new website, 4patriots.com/martini. Many deals going on right now, including the Sauna Wrap Therapeutic Blanket, now 80% off, as well as the Halo XT Tactical Solar Flashlight. A 4-pack is just $119. But of course, there are many other fantastic products that we talk about as well, including the best-selling survival food kits. They taste fantastic. They're made with real meat and vegetables. If stored correctly, they last up to 25 years. They're very portable, so you can take them on camping trips or on picnics, but they're best in an emergency, especially if your power goes out. If you're in Iowa, there's a big windstorm and rain on the East Coast today, too. So if your power were to go out, you just need to boil water over a fire, mix in the survival food kits, simmer and serve, and you're all set to go. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone and get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, while the Republicans slug it out beginning in Iowa next week, and we'll see if there is, in fact, a candidate who seriously threatens Donald Trump's quest for a third straight Republican nomination, The Biden administration, of course, has only token opposition. As we mentioned last week, they're even trying to make sure that people in certain states don't even have a chance to vote for them. So in the meantime, they're summoning reporters to Delaware and basically chewing them out because they don't think their coverage is positive enough of President Biden. Semafor with the story. Biden's re-election campaign has begun organizing a series of off-the-record trips, apparently not totally off the record, for top political reporters and editors to the team's headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, and meet senior officials, including the campaign manager, deputies, and other high-ranking advisors. They're also using it as an opportunity to tell them what they're getting wrong. Two people with knowledge of the situation told Semafor that during meetings with reporters from outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others, campaign officials have invoked a coverage spreadsheet laying out areas where the team believes their reporting has fallen short. In particular, campaign officials have chafed at some of the coverage of former President Trump, feeling that outlets are too focused on his legal troubles and are not paying enough attention to some of his incendiary recent statements on the campaign trail. Jim, if the Trump campaign or any Republican campaign was giving mainstream media reporters the what for, this would be obviously a much bigger story. But as a journalist who, of course, prizes your independence and following the facts, what do you make of a campaign sitting you down, whipping out a spreadsheet and tisk-tisking your coverage because it's not glowing enough for their preferred guy?
Well, Greg, before I answer that question, I'm just going to make an observation that the undernews, I think Mickey Kaus threw that idea around, like the idea that sometimes you can see news that exists out there by the way people are reacting, even if you can't see it yourself. There is undernews in this story. The undernews is that the Biden campaign either believes or has determined coverage of Trump's legal troubles and trials is not a liability for him, because they're saying you're covering that too much and not enough about all these incendiary things he's doing. If they thought coverage of Trump's trials was going to hurt him, they'd want them to keep on that. They'd want to beat that drum. Clearly they don't. Clearly they want to focus on the incendiary things. Now look, maybe it's, maybe one is worse than the other. But I thought that was interesting. That just kind of, quietly jumped out at me in that summary of this story from Semafor. As for this, again, it's just kind of mind-boggling that the Biden campaign thinks that they're being covered too harshly, and that the Trump campaign isn't being covered harshly enough. Like, where's the positive coverage of Trump that they're so upset about? Where, I'm kind of baffled by that. This is just characteristic whining, exaggerated self-regard, and inability to see themselves directly. We were talking about football earlier. Somebody said about the importance of self-scouting, of looking at your own team and determining what you're doing well and what you're not doing well, and not lying to yourself, not fooling yourself into believing the things better than they are. The Biden campaign is and the Biden White House is absolutely terrible at self-scouting. They can't see themselves accurately or honestly. And then kind of the third thing that jumps out, I talk about this every now and then with Republican campaign strategists. Greg, is there an easier job in the world than being either the press secretary or the communications director of a Democratic campaign? I mean, like, the funny thing is, like, we look at it like, oh my God, these guys get puff pieces all the time. They get glowing profiles. They get such sympathetic coverage. They get such relentlessly negative coverage of their opponents. And yet somehow you still find every cycle Democrats whining that somehow the press coverage on them is too tough. And what's more, by the way, before I go any further, I just also want to jump in and note, I can make a molecular level defense of all the reporters having this meeting, which is to say that if you have a chance to speak to the a major presidential campaign manager or folks like, then you take the meeting, and if somebody wants to gripe about the coverage, you listen to them, you see if they got a fair gripe. I don't think they do, but there's no harm in taking the meeting. There's no harm in listening. Usually that makes them feel better, and you'd look worse if you said, I'm not even interested in talking to you about your, how you think the race is going and how, our coverage of it so far. So I don't mind them. I think if you change the way you cover them based on their complaints and it's just, the usual whining, that's not justifiable. But no, I just think that Democrats, they get used to getting not just like the wind at their backs, a hurricane force wind at their backs. And the moment they encounter any tough coverage, and Lord knows, I mean, you could point to the verbal gaffes, you could point to the age, you could point to the light schedule. I'm sure you guys talked about Secretary Austin yesterday. Biden and his team have good reasons to have tough coverage of them. And they whine about it and they complain about it. And we saw Biden snapping, why don't you write about something that matters? And the real polls say I'm ahead. God, it's endless whining. But this is our leadership, America. Good luck.
Well, the polls are the one thing, and that's not putting together a lot of analysis. They're just reporting on polls that show Trump ahead overall and in some of the key states at the moment. So they probably don't like that too much. But you teed up the takeaway question here, Jim. If they change their coverage, then it's not a good thing. But does that kind of pressure usually lead to that? Because I would assume better coverage leads to more access.
Wait, access to Biden? Greg, when's the last time you did a sit-down interview with anybody? When's the last time you did a press conference?
True.
True. It's very hard to imagine. Or what? We'll cut off access to Secretary Austin? They don't even know where he is. How much less access to Biden could most of the White House press corps possibly get? Never mind the campaign crew. That doesn't strike me as a terribly frightening threat. The other thing is, if they decided, okay, we're going to be more positive towards Biden and we're going to be more negative towards Trump, Greg, how could we tell? How would it look any different than what we got now?
I mean, a lot of these reporters do lean to the left, Jim, so maybe it plays in their heads a little bit that somebody that they probably don't like at all, like Trump, could potentially be benefiting from the way they're reporting. I can see that working psychologically a little bit, but hopefully a lot of these folks have been around long enough that they don't.
I can also see it backfiring.
Very much.
I could also see, somebody, you think I'm being too tough to you? How about this angle that I haven't really been focusing on so far, or something like that. So we'll see if anything changes, but again, it's a perfect demonstration of the arrogance of this administration. And this, it's not let's put it this way. Greg, Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare are not the only forms of entitlement that need to be reformed.
Perfect. All right, let's talk about another fantastic sponsor, a brand new sponsor here on the Three Martini Lunch, and that is Bio-Optimizers, specifically Magnesium Breakthrough by Bio-Optimizers. It's resolution time, and if you want to do just one thing to improve your sleep and overall well-being, take the number one mineral for that, and that's Magnesium Breakthrough by Bio-Optimizers. And right now, you get 10% off any order at biooptimizers.com/martini and use the promo code martini. So what's great about Magnesium Breakthrough? Well, unlike other magnesium supplements that might be giving you a couple of forms of magnesium, Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. In addition to experiencing relaxed sleep, Magnesium Breakthrough also helps improve digestion, supports muscle recovery, and supports healthy bone density. So do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so you can get the vitality you need to conquer your dreams. Go to biooptimizers.com/martini and enter the promo code martini to get 10% off any order. Again, that's biooptimizers.com/martini, biooptimizers.com/martini.
Biden still wants more of your money. This time, it's called a perpetuity tax. The more you make, the more you pay in. Even though you get taxed already from your income, small businesses will get waxed without seeing the money they actually put in. Check out the Watchdog on Wall Street podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast.
All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now, and this is actually one that we saw coming. For those who listened, and thank you if you did, to our year-end specials, we had many different categories of best, worst, and most, and one of the categories was boldest tactics. And Jim's choice for boldest tactic of 2023 was Donald Trump's decision not to participate in the GOP primary debates, calculating that they could only really hurt his position because he had a commanding lead by the time they started. And that proved to be correct. They have done no damage to him, as we can tell. Things are tightening up a little bit, it would seem, in New Hampshire. But overall, Donald Trump remains a heavy, heavy favorite to be the Republican nominee. But as we discussed that tactic paying off, we had this discussion about how it could backfire on him in the long term. The question in my mind, though, Jim, is whether he has set the precedent now that's actually going to work to his own detriment, because I'm sure he thinks he would come out on top of a debate against President Biden. And now maybe it's Joe Biden that determines, you know what, it's not in my interest. I have more to lose than to gain. So you know what?
Yes.
Come up with some excuse for why we can't do any general election debates. I would not be surprised if that happened.
I'm not going to dignify this process by getting on a stage with that clown, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah, very easy to imagine that happening.
Well, Jim, we were prescient yet again on this particular issue because, as you point out in your addendum to the Morning Jolt today, in referencing a corner post that you did, the movement is already underway for Biden not to debate Donald Trump. The Hill quotes Senator Dick Durbin, who says, I would think twice about it. He says Trump was completely outrageous in the way he debated Hillary Clinton. Chris Coons, who's very much a part of the Biden campaign, referenced Trump's recent comments about poisoning the blood of the nation. And he talked about the 2020 debate with Biden, where it was basically a free-for-all and nobody respected each other's speaking time, Trump interjecting a lot of different times. And so Coons says the fact that former President Trump was unable to conduct himself in just a minimally reasonable way during the 2020 debate, and that he's refusing to debate any of his primary opponents this time, would make a pretty strong case for not dignifying him as a candidate by sharing a debate stage, which is almost exactly what you said when we followed up on that, as far as Biden having grounds now to say he won't debate, because what the heck can Trump say about it? He didn't do it during the primary. So what do you make of the Biden people throwing down this fleece to see how it plays with the media and the general public? And are we going to have a presidential general election with no debates for the first time in over 50 years?
Well, it certainly now looks like it's within the realm of possibility. We shouldn't. It's not that Chris Coons and Durbin are on the Biden campaign formally, but they're both pretty close to Biden, and it seems reasonable to conclude, if these guys are talking about this publicly, that this is not the first time this has been brought up in their circles. That it feels like, there are Democrats who probably, the first debate of the two that Biden and Trump had back in 2020, first one was the mess. This was the one that was moderated by Chris Wallace, and Trump kept kind of shouting over both Wallace and Biden, and your mileage may vary, but I think it didn't. I don't think it went well for Trump. This was also right before his COVID diagnosis, where because of all the shouting, you couldn't hear anything. And very often, if you let Biden talk, his mouth will get him in trouble. And I think that actually, in the second debate, we saw more of that, and that actually went better for Trump, because I think that's when Biden said he was going to eliminate all drilling or all fracking. It was a mess. It was much worse for Biden. Anyway, I think 4 years have gone by. Biden is older. As I mentioned in the last Martini, you don't see this guy doing sit-down interviews anymore. You don't see him doing press conferences. He reads off the teleprompter and then he leaves the stage, and that's exactly what his team wants him to do. So put him up on a debate stage. Maybe it's terrible. So it's conceivable and reasonable for Democrats to say, do we want this guy up on stage with Donald Trump, or is he going to look like a confused, overwhelmed, doddering old man? So now I think this is preparing the battle space. This is laying the groundwork. I don't think you'd see any decision about Biden not participating in the debates until summer or early fall or closer to that point. And I think they'll be looking for any excuse to say, oh my goodness, can you believe Donald Trump said X, Y, and Z? This is utterly unacceptable and unbecoming of any presidential candidate, and we're not even going to dignify him by getting up on the stage again. I'm not saying it's certain to happen. I think there's a considerable amount of risk to that. I think a decent number of people would look at that and see right through it and say, this is a guy who's scared to debate because he's 81, turning 82 in a couple of months, and he's just not up to it. But we'll see how it shakes out. My sneaky suspicion is that there's a decent number of Democrats who don't want any debates in the fall and are seeing the reasoning why and are trying to set up the excuse, and they're starting pretty early.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have debates to have a democracy, but for the guy who keeps crowing about how he is the last bastion of defending our system, ducking a general election debate would look pretty bad. But again, his likely opponent definitely gave him the ammo to do it. So
I was going to say, what's Trump going to say? Hey, every serious candidate should be debating his opponents. Well,
right.
You chose not to do that against your primary opponents, Mr. Trump. So now look, given a choice, I think general election debates are probably more important than primary election debates. But I like seeing debates. I like, maybe in 2020 we had too many amongst the Democrats. That was a little, we may have too many candidates, but it's always good to see candidates up there defending their record, defending their agenda, trying to. Now, does this mean every debate has been well run and you love every question? No, but it's better to have that than to not have that. I think participating in debate is it's part of the process. It's part of the ritual of our democracy. And it's kind of frustrating to see doddering, angry, loose cannon mouth old men opting out of it just because everybody knows it'd be a disaster for them.
They're not sending their best. They're not sending their best. But anyway, Jim, stay warm. Hope you brought your boots. Maybe grab a shovel if you're not going anywhere else. But I will talk to you tomorrow.
No boots, no shovel. I pack well. See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review, joining us from Iowa, as he will tomorrow and Thursday. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. If you don't already, tell some friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Tuesday and join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.